AI budget waste is not a future problem. It is the line item quietly draining your operating margin right now, and most operators don't see it until renewal season. According to Zilow's 2025 SaaS Management Index, organizations are wasting an average of $21 million annually on unused or underutilized software licenses, a 14.2% increase year over year. If that number sounds enterprise only, consider this. Smaller companies with under 500 employees now spend an average of $5 million on SaaS while running 152 applications across their stack. The tools multiplied without a strategy to govern them, and the result is a sprawling overlap problem most operators haven't mapped. By the end of this, you'll know exactly where the waste hides, how to run an audit that surfaces the real cost, and which tools let you automate the consolidation before your next renewal hits. The pattern looks the same in agencies, ops-heavy businesses, and professional services firms. A department head subscribes to an AI writing tool. 3 months later, a second team adds a different one because the first didn't connect to their CRM. The finance team gets billed for both. Nobody flags it because each tool costs less than $200 a month, and nobody has a full picture of the stack. That's the operational trap. Not any single subscription, but the compounding drag of tools that overlap, don't integrate, and require separate logins, separate training, and separate management time. That's not a small problem. According to BetterCloud's 2025 State of SaaS report, 84% of applications and 74% of SaaS spending now sit outside IT's direct responsibility, managed instead by individual departments or individual employee expense accounts. The consolidation rate across organizations dropped from 14% in 2023 to just 5% in 2024, meaning the number of tools in most stacks is still growing, just more slowly. And per BetterCloud's data, 15% of employees are routinely running unsanctioned generative AI tools on corporate devices, creating overlap the business doesn't even know to account for. The reason this persists isn't careless spending. It's a structural problem in how AI tools enter the stack. Product-led growth means any team member with a credit card can onboard a new AI application in under 10 minutes. Approval cycles weren't built for that speed. Procurement controls that worked when software came from 3 vendors don't catch 30 departmental subscriptions. And the vendors themselves have shifted to consumption-based and AI add-on pricing that inflates costs in ways that didn't exist in the previous contract cycle. Per CIO.com, citing Gartner analyst Mike Tucciaroni in late 2025, SaaS subscription costs from major vendors have risen between 10% and 20%, while IT budget growth projections sit at just 2.8%. Vendors are packaging AI feature upgrades as justified price increases, and organizations are absorbing those costs on top of tools that were already underutilized. An operator running 15 AI subscriptions across their business, each up 15% in annual cost, is paying materially more this year for the same problem they had last year. The financial consequence isn't just the line items you can see, it's the invisible overhead, staff time switching between redundant tools, re-entering data across platforms that don't talk to each other, and the management bandwidth spent maintaining a stack that was never designed to be cohesive. That overhead doesn't show on a software invoice, but it shows in your labor costs and in the throughput your team actually delivers. Here's the diagnostic step most operators skip, and it changes everything about what you cut and what you keep. Before touching any subscription, map every AI-enabled tool in your stack to a functional category, not a department. The categories that matter are content generation, data extraction, scheduling and coordination, CRM enrichment, and summarization. Most businesses running more than 10 AI tools have between 2 and 4 tools operating in each of those categories simultaneously, often purchased by different departments, unaware of the overlap. Once you have the category map, run a displacement test on each tool per category. The question isn't whether the tool is used, it's whether it replaces a labor hour that would otherwise cost the business real money. If a tool doesn't displace a clear operational cost or eliminate a manual error-prone step, it belongs on a consolidation list. This is where AI budget waste becomes visible as a workflow problem, not just a spend problem, and where the fix starts to take shape. The next step is where Make.com or N8N becomes the consolidation engine, not just another tool in the stack. Once you've identified your highest displacement tool in each category, the goal is to route all related workflows through a single automation layer. In Make.com, you build scenarios that connect your retained tools directly, your CRM, your content output, your summarization pipeline, so that data moves between them without manual re-entry. In N8N, for teams with developer access, the self-hosted architecture handles the same logic with no execution limits. And its native LangChain integration means your AI agent nodes can orchestrate across multiple retained tools from a single workflow. The pattern interrupt most operators miss at this stage. The goal is not to automate more. The goal is to automate fewer, better connected things. Stacking automation on top of a sprawling toolset doesn't fix the sprawl. It adds a layer on top of it. Consolidate first, then automate the consolidated stack. Step 3 is the removal sequence. Before canceling any subscription, document its current workflow trigger, what data flows through it, and where a human review point sits in the process. This takes half a day per tool and prevents the failure mode where a cut creates a gap 3 weeks later that costs more to fix than the subscription ever cost to keep. Once documented, cancel in order of lowest displacement score. Redirect those workflows into your consolidated automation layer. Review the stack quarterly, not annually, because at 6 new applications entering the average tech environment each month, an annual review is already 6 months behind. When operators complete this consolidation cycle, the results show up in 3 measurable places, and the data from the last 2 years confirms the pattern across business sizes. Zylo's 2025 SaaS Management Index found that the average company wastes 25 to 30% of its SaaS spend on unused or underutilized licenses. For a business spending $15,000 a month on software tools, that is between $3,750 and $4,500 a month walking out the door. Over $50,000 a year in recoverable spend per Zylo's benchmark. For a 50-person team, that number scales to cover multiple headcount equivalent in wasted subscription overhead. The recovery isn't theoretical. It's the direct result of mapping category overlap and removing duplicate functionality. And here's what the data tells operators, who are still waiting to act. A productive analysis of nearly 100 million SaaS licenses found that 40% of licenses across the sample were entirely unused. That wasn't a fringe finding in one industry. It ran across the sample regardless of company type. What Productive's data shows is that the problem isn't about which tools a business chose. It's about the absence of a governance process to catch accumulation before it compounds. The businesses that recovered the most weren't the ones that bought better tools. They were the ones that built a review cadence into their operating calendar. Gartner's research, cited consistently across SaaS management literature, indicates that organizations applying 3 consistent practices, license recycling, configuration right-sizing, and active software asset management, can reduce software costs by up to 30%. For an SME spending $180,000 a year on software, a 30% reduction returns $54,000 to the operating budget. That number funds a real hire, extends runway, or converts directly into margin. The 3 benchmarks from Zylo, Productive, and Gartner point to the same conclusion. The waste is structural, it's measurable, and the recovery framework is the same, regardless of your stack size. Now, what this audit doesn't fix, and where operators get into trouble by moving too fast. Consolidation doesn't solve a data quality problem. If the tools you retain are operating on inconsistent, fragmented, or siloed data, consolidating the workflow layer surfaces that problem but doesn't correct it. An automated pipeline built on bad input data produces bad output faster. Before automating the consolidated stack, the underlying data, customer records, contact enrichment, output files, needs to be in a state where the automation can act on it reliably. That's a prerequisite, not an afterthought. The second dependency risk is undocumented workflows. When a tool is removed before its workflow is documented, the gap doesn't appear immediately. It appears 3 weeks later when a team member can't complete a deliverable because a step they relied on is gone without a replacement. The documentation step isn't optional. It's the only thing that keeps consolidation from creating operational disruption that costs more than the waste it was meant to fix. There is also a compliance boundary that applies to a specific category of tools. Any AI-enabled application handling contract language, financial output review, data privacy checks, or audit-adjacent functions should not go on a consolidation cut list without a direct conversation with your legal and finance leads. These tools often function as an independent verification layer. Removing them to recover $200 a month in subscription cost while taking on undisclosed compliance risk is not an ROI trade-off. It's a governance failure. Finally, set the right expectation for consolidation timing. The recovery is real, but it takes 1 to 2 billing cycles to fully reflect, and your team will need a transition window to rebuild habits around the retained tools. A consolidation rushed to hit a quarterly savings target often stalls in the following quarter as workarounds accumulate. Build the transition time into the plan before you execute it. AI budget waste compounds quietly because no single subscription looks expensive enough to flag. The cost is in the stack, not the line item, and it only becomes visible when you map category overlap and run a displacement test against what you're actually paying for. The audit framework, category map, displacement test, documentation, then removal, is repeatable, and operators who build it into a quarterly operating cadence stop the accumulation before it restarts. What does your category map show right now? And do you have a single view across every AI subscription running in your business? ROI over hype.